here in the perimeter, there are no stars. Out here, we is stoned, immaculate.
Hello and welcome. This is the C86 show. I'm David Eastaugh. As you know, we love a special guest. This week it's going to be the turn of the multi-instrumentalist John Wills, who I spoke to very recently to find out more about life, love, poetry and all that other groovy stuff. Has been in lots of bands, including Loop, plus the hair and skin trading company. Has had lots of collaborations with various people, including Pinkie Maclure, and also goes by the name of Pumajaw, who has released various bits and pieces. I will put a link of their Bandcamp page in the notes below. But anyway, you're going to find out more about John and his amazing life in this riveting interview. So after several minutes of interesting but casual chat, we get down to the exciting subject of the early formative years. I know. John, it's over to you.
Well, I'm a bit older than you. Well, you see, it was a fair bit older than you. I was born in 1958. So I sort of narrowly missed the birth of rock and roll, I suppose.
Yes.
My brother was 5 years older than me. So I suppose I think my earliest memory was probably listening to Electric Ladyland with him, actually. That was the thing that really sort of blew my mind.
Yes. Well, it was one of those classic albums, wasn't it? Sort of discovering Hendrix in later life and then all along the Watchtower and Purple Haze.
Yeah, I think that, but at the same time, I was a kid, so I was listening to Bubblegum Bop and the Beatles, and so I had all these things going on at the same time because I was, when that came out, 67, I think, something like that. So I'd be 9 years old, so it wasn't really designed for me, probably. But I think the fact that my brother was that much older, it's that sort of classic thing of getting a musical education from him, but still retaining your sort of pop music stuff.
Yes, I mean, the charts were always very exciting and oobla dee, oobla dum, or something like that, but there's the Monkees, wasn't there? They sort of delighted us with their kind of, frivolous pop.
Yes, and they were on the telly, and the telly was like quite sacred, I suppose. It was only on for a few hours a day. So
it was a sacred thing. When you turned it on, you still had a blank screen for about a minute before something started to appear. You'd hit this button, and it was very physical, wasn't it? Putting the telly on.
It was literally. My dad would quite be walking around the room trying to get a signal as well. It seems never really.
Oh God, I've forgotten the days when your dad went in the attic to try and get a better reception.
Yeah. Never guaranteed you were going to see anything.
Oh God, yes, and being shouted, left or right. I can't hold it. I'm just holding it in the air. I can't attach it to anything. That's why I eventually got sort of bits of string around the rafters of the attic, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yes, I'd forgotten those good old days.
Well, I think they were good old days in some ways. I mean, everything's very simple now and very straightforward, isn't it? I mean, most things seem to work and get instant satisfaction.
Guaranteed. But I think, I guess one thing is that if you were curious about a record, you couldn't just go and listen to it in the old days. It was quite hard work. You either went to a record library or you went around second-hand shops or you saved up money, which took a long time to get it.
There were listening booths, weren't there? I mean, that was kind of our Spotify, I suppose. You just kind of pretend you're going to buy stuff and spend all afternoon in the listening booth.
But it was very intimidating. I found those record shops when I was, they were cool people with cigarettes and, an attitude. And you'd be there as a young kid flicking quite slowly and some kid was going through some maniac whizzing through all the records at 100 miles an hour with one fag, and it was all like, God, I can't keep up with this kind of cool dude next to me. I'm going to have to get out the shop quickly. Because they were small, weren't they, and intimidating.
They were, yeah. They were.
And then if you did buy something, you went to the counter and everyone just looked at you and you felt like, oh, can I have the latest? And you thought, oh my God, they're going to laugh at me.
I know. I know. I used to send my mum into the record shop, actually. She was really good about that.
That was very noble.
Very cowardly of me.
Yes. Yeah, no. So there you go. So then, so you vaguely kind of brushed against the 60s, but your brother must have been devastated when he was at that age, because 5 years older, because obviously the 60s came to a bit of a bad, as parties coming to a bad end. That was a classic, wasn't it? Really, with the death of three major artists and
Yeah,
Altamont and Charles Manson and
so much.
assassinations. Yeah. So, did he cope
Yeah.
with the 70s at all? Your brother?
Yeah, he embraced the 70s. I think he really liked the 70s, actually. He's like his Led Zeppelins and things like that.
Oh,
And Stones. I mean, that's kind of the direction he went in. I went more. I was more like you. I like glam, Roxy music, that kind of stuff. More the arty pop, and some prog.
prog. Nice. Well, I
Only because that's kind of what there was. It wasn't really. This is sort of pre-bloated prog. Wasn't too bad, I didn't think. But just when it got really sort of horribly, really horrible.
yeah. I had a brother who was 7 years older, and he was the prog person and he had the records in the, he got those kind of plastic covers to put in them and the Roger Dean, and it was all, double CD, vinyl, gatefold sleeves, and it was all very, and Rick Wakeman had one, which was Journey to the Centre of the Earth, where you had bits of foil that you had to look down to see something that you couldn't quite understand what you were looking at, but it felt deep and meaningful, and you were somehow tripping out on this great concept. And so I sneaked into his room when he said, "Don't touch my records," to listen to these, but records which weren't obviously on top of the pops and in the charts, but that Yes Genesis stuff, which was kind of interesting, and like King Arthur, that particular album as well. I mean, it was probably the bloated solo albums that
It was by then, yeah, I think so. I mean, actually, I think I checked out by then, but I can still, I mean, I hate musical snobbery anyway. So, do you know what I mean? I mean, I never, just really because it goes back to the trauma of going to record shops probably as a kid.
Yes. Well, whereabouts did you grow up?
In Penge, which is next to Beckenham.
Right. So you were near the Beckenham Arts Lab.
Yes. Yeah.
So did you go to? Have you been to the bandstand?
Yes, in Beckenham.
You paid homage to David Bowie's free festival.
I played on the bandstand supporting Splodgeness Abounds.
God, in front of a sold-out crowd.
Yes, they had a sold-out crowd. Yeah, we didn't. But yeah, so yeah. It's been So
you had that suburban lifestyle.
Definitely.
So David, you could relate to David's journey.
Kind of, but his suburban lifestyle is this massive, in probably one of the poshest streets in Beckenham, which we wouldn't normally go to.
Right.
But yeah, it was, he was around, definitely.
His kind of vibe, his aura was there. Did you ever go to the place that he got together with Angie and various members of the Spiders from Mars, the big house that they all...
That was the place I'm talking about, yeah.
Oh, right.
Yeah, that was in the poshest street in Beckenham. It was a massive, massive, massive place. I never went there. No, I didn't even know it was there, to be honest.
Right, and yes, it was quite an interesting little journey. Then he sort of relocated to London, and the there was some sort of club, a gay club that they all went to, Sombrero Club.
Oh, Sombrero Club, yeah.
Yeah, which was very exciting, apparently. So, yes, I mean, I was only 8, so it wasn't so exciting for me.
It was quite weird with him, wasn't it? Because like you were saying about Space Oddity, he was really sort of considered as a one-hit wonder.
Yes,
it was quite...
with a novelty instrument.
Yeah.
So he was definitely. I mean, it was interesting because being obsessed a bit with him, just a little bit. He spent most of the '60s, making some really mediocre records, and there was no way you would have put a tenner on this guy making it. I mean, most people would have given up quite merrily, really. I mean, and then that folk stuff he did with his girlfriend Hermione and Hutch, is really... I mean, it's interesting to listen to it, but it's like, wow, still no spark of what comes next,
Yeah, it's kind of a sort of rudderless period of this.
Yeah, it's a hell of a long apprenticeship that he did, and
you see, the difference is, what I find interesting is that he would never be given. You would never be given that much rope now by a record company or people generally. I think everything has to be so quick. It seems, so you're not getting those people developing. There could be lots of possible David Bowies.
Well, absolutely. No, a lot of people have mentioned the A&R and sort of developing and getting some more encouragement to do the next album. Because most people's, I mean, I know there are examples of the first album being brilliant and the rest not, but most people's is like, that's got potential, and the second or third, and then possibly the next one after that. But yeah, I mean, it's a bit different now, isn't it? So then as you were trucking through the very early 70s, what was the first gig you went to?
The very first gig I went to was the Four Tops in Croydon at the Fairfield Halls. I think I went because my brother was probably going, and it's someone I'd seen on the telly. And that's as much as it was. I didn't really know what I was going to see or anything about it. But to be honest, I think I could have probably gone and seen anyone. It was just a spectacle of the whole thing, and really loud music, and just sitting there in this. It's just like a dream world for me. I just loved it.
I would imagine.
Yeah, it was so alien to, because all I'd ever seen was on the TV, and it was like but actually being in a live venue like that was just totally magical. And I think that probably, if I wasn't feeling like that anyway, that was definitely a catalyst that got me.
Yes, well, I would imagine the showmanship and the tightness.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it wasn't. There's no sort of cynicism about the whole thing. It was just it was just so classy and theatrical. I just loved it. Great.
My God, I could imagine they must have been so rehearsed and tight, and it must have been and at the top of their kind of game almost, really.
Well, Well, actually, they're probably. I mean, it was probably a bit late for them, really, but they're still,
I remember all those sort of soul bands on Top of the Pops, and you'd hear them on the bus in the morning going to school, and incredible songs. So then, when you got to 16, did you leave school at this stage, or did you stay on?
No, I left at 16. Yeah,
16. So this would have been sort of 1974 time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so 74. That was Bowie, Rod Stewart, I suppose, and Roxy Music. The end of glam rock. Going into, and then it was then we got into the doldrums a bit, just before punk.
Yes, well, Rod Stewart was about to do Atlantic Crossing, wasn't he, a few years? And he was always appearing with that amazing hair and Brick Eklund, which found, as a young person, thinking, God, I'm never going to date anybody like Brick Eklund, am I? This is way, I'm not sure where I'm going to go here in my life.
In Wicker Man. Yeah, I mean, he sort of got more and more away from because I used to, as a kid, my brother was really into sort of white blues, so he really liked Jeff Beck, and Rod Stewart was Jeff Beck's singer.
Yes.
I quite liked some of that stuff. I didn't really like, I liked his stuff with the Faces, but when he went on his own, I didn't really like it at all, actually.
What, The Killing of Georgie Boy, or Georgie?
That was a great song. Now, that is a great song, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I must admit my second single was Sailing by Rod Stewart, by the way.
Was it really?
Confession Time, I know.
B-side of that?
It was, Stone Cold Sober was the B-side of that single.
Really? That's another good thing about, quite often you buy a single like that, and the B-side be like sort of mad psychedelic.
Well, the third one was Blondie doing Denis Denis, and that had a Contact in Red Square and Kung Fu Fighting. And again, they were good songs. It wasn't like anything. They were, but yes, one discovered the joy of B-sides at that stage. So then, so what did you leave school and get a job at this stage in the mid 70s?
I had a job. Working for Shell. It was a really miserable job, but it was really well paid, and so basically it paid for me to be in a band because I was helping people buy their stuff to be in this band. So I was in lots of really crappy little bands, like everyone was, and gigging because you could in those days quite easily. Yes. It was all right as long as you didn't have any aspirations. If you were in a band about that time, you could actually have quite a good time, but to actually aspire to putting a record out was virtually impossible. Yeah. I think about 1976, 5 bands were signed. So it's like there's no way you're going to. Whenever you did a gig, someone would say, "I think Muff Winwood's coming from whatever RCA or whatever label he was."
Yes.
Never did.
Yeah, Muff Winwood was quite the one, wasn't he, actually?
He was, yeah.
Or Miles Copeland, I think, was the other one. That
Was he really? Yeah.
Yes, he was a bit of a go-getter. But Muff, they often say, oh, he wasn't very good, but he produced our record.
Yeah.
He was Steve's brother, so he got a lot of contacts at that stage. Had punk then, but then 76, you would have been a perfect age for that punk moment, really.
Yes, I was. Although to be honest, nobody. I think it was kind of weird because if you really were ready for that punk moment, you really had to be a bit of a punk before that, because I mean most punk gigs weren't full of punk-looking people. Not certainly where I lived anyway. It was just the same, just loads of people with long hair and denims.
Yes.
So you couldn't just sort of switch it on like that. But I was listening to, I suppose, I mean, the first sort of punky things I got into weren't really punk. It was more like Richard Hell and Television.
And what about Richard Strange and the Doctors of Madness?
Oh, well, Richard Strange was a lot later, actually. I actually became friendly with him through another reason, but that wasn't until about 1979, 1980.
Had Dr. Feelgood appeared on your scene?
Oh, I love Dr. Feelgood. See, that was what I was really into, was that sound. I went to see them loads of times.
Yes.
Yeah.
And had you? When did the drums appear in your life?
Drums appeared in my life about 1973, I think.
And what was the inspiration or the idea with that?
It was just like, it wasn't an inspiration. It was just like it really felt like it was in me. I used to play the settee with my mum's wooden knitting needles. And it was just
Classic.
something, just came naturally, sort of thing. And because I didn't really concentrate on many things as a kid, I said to my parents, I really want to get a drum kit. And I knew my brother's girlfriend's brother at the time had a drum kit for sale.
Perfect.
And they just said, all right then, thinking a couple of weeks, that'll be that.
Yeah.
Be over it. And I wasn't. And so I carried on doing that. And but the weird thing about this transitional time was, before, well, say about 1973, 74, you couldn't get in a band unless you were really good. And then by the time I was really good, you couldn't get in a band unless you weren't very good. So you sort of had to dumb yourself down.
So you went from sort of Alan White, Bill Bruford, kind of jazz rock drummer to sort of just, a name.
Yeah.
What was your drummer inspiration at this stage? Was it John Bonham?
A bit, probably more Keith Moon, I think. I like sort of tribally, sort of out of control drumming, I suppose. And I was never really. I like Charlie Watts, but I didn't want to be Charlie Watts. More sort of crazy, mad stuff. Mitch Mitchell.
Right, of course, dear old Mitch. Yes.
Baker, so that's what I was really into. But I was also really into sound.
Did Brian Eno appear in your life during that period then, the ambient albums?
Well, later on he probably did. And also my first connection to anything like that was, my friend was in art college in London at Slade Art College, and his final exam, he wanted to do something with sound, and he found out that there was a little studio in the college which he didn't know how to use. And I didn't really know how to use it either, but we sort of muddled along. But we had this VCS3 synthesizer, which is the same one Eno had.
Right,
and it was just brilliant. So we had a whole summer just messing around with the synthesizer and a 4-track recorder. And that really set the wheels in motion for me, because that was as interesting playing drums, and probably more interesting. And so I got into production that way. So I was probably doing as much sort of soundy stuff as drumming at that point.
Right. God, so the synth. Did you get into people like Vangelis or Patrick Moraz or Tangerine Dream?
A bit, maybe a bit. I like Cabaret Voltaire. I really liked
Right.
later on, and yeah, I mean, to be honest, the electronic stuff. I was probably quite late getting into actual real electronic stuff like Kraftwerk, and it's probably the first thing that I really listened to.
And I suppose Laurie Anderson had come along with those Superman.
Yeah, that was later. That was about 79, I think, something like that.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I think I was still.
Went to see her last year.
Did you? I saw her on the late 80s doing the Strange Angel tour. That was I mean, I know it's one of those albums that people go, oh, that was a bit commercial, but actually I really like the songs on it. And it was I was so pleased to have gone because she was mesmerizing, and it was like, and she hadn't become Laurie Anderson, the Lou Reed. It was just like, it was just like, well, yeah, it's a great album, Strange Angel. And so yeah, it's a chuff to see that one. Yes, I know. There was some interesting little things starting to appear actually during that period, wasn't there? And production.
Yeah, I mean, for me, my punk rock was more sort of Daniel Miller and Mute.
Right, there you go. Did you go and see Rima Rima at this stage?
No.
Rima. Yeah, well, they morphed into Marco and Peroni went into Adamant, and others went into Renegade Soundwave, and then various other bands on. I think they were the first release on. I think it was 4AD. Sorry, I got my record. I'll edit all that out. Don't worry. No, I won't. People will write in and go, "Oh my God, he doesn't know the difference between Mute and 4AD." Shocking. I want my money back. Oh no, I didn't pay anything. So anyway, look, yes, I know, but it was interesting. I was still too young. That's my excuse. I lived in the countryside. That's another excuse. Most people were into the Quo, status quo, heavy metal. Yeah, they're more Quo and heavy metal. Yeah, you couldn't say anything about the Quo without being beaten up. If you went, oh, quite like the beat and mod, it's like, oh my God, doof. So that was the end of that. So it was a bit of a thing, you know. Disco's always had a heavy metal section where boys got up and headbanged and then walked off looking like they were going to beat you up. Amazing scenes. It must. If only people could have videoed or recorded those, it would have been. You could imagine a commentary with Richard Attenborough. Or David, one of the Attenborough brothers, talking about this tribe, because they'd always end with a slow dance at the end with a smooch, you know, and it was like the tension then was through the roof. By then I was anxious, mess and had to leave quickly, but I was so uncool.
Most punk gigs were incredibly tribal. I mean, I don't know where these tribes even came from. Like Teddy Boys, suddenly there were lots of Teddy Boys in Bromley and Beckenham where. All of a sudden, I don't know where they came from, and they were mods, there was punks, there was all these factions.
Yeah, we were very tribal.
Yeah, it's quite interesting.
But then, as the 80s progressed, you know, things shifted again. There was that. I felt like the 80s suddenly had a real. I mean, most decades start quite slowly, but the 80s whacked in. I think it was the Thatcher period, but then there was that new romantic music, you know, which felt very frivolous and hedonistic, and you know, the Falkland War happened, the miners' strike, Greenham Common. You know, things got quite divided quite quickly. We were suddenly dancing to Duran Duran and Spandau Ballet. I wasn't. I was far too uptight. So then we had that post-punk period, which you mentioned Cabaret Voltaire, but then there was all those other scratchy bands and interesting artists and people with unfortunate drug addictions.
Yeah, I really liked the early 80s a lot, actually.
Yes.
It did seem like every decade ended on a sort of big ending, and then everything would change for the next one. Do you know what I mean? I mean, I think it's from the 60s to the 70s, and the 70s, certainly from the 70s to the 80s, so everything sort of calmed down. I mean, the punk had made its point and sort of democratized music in a way.
Yeah, and the bands that started to jump on that bandwagon were really ridiculous. And it was like, I think we need to stop this now. You know, this is clearly not punk,
it's not what we paid up for at all.
No, it was. I mean, when you ever see a few of those, I mean, it's like, oh, this is quite painful. Actually, they're just blokes with, you know, a bit of a Sid Vicious look, but nothing. There was no authenticity, was there really?
I
And
know.
it was interesting because the New York punk scene, I found it, decades later, quite interesting because there was a couple of really interesting labels, Z Records, and it had a much more eclectic kind of vibe to it. It didn't sound like, just the normal 3-minute kind of shouty thing. There was like a bit of a jazz vibe going with people like
Exactly,
James
that's
Chance.
exactly it. And the reason for that, I think, is because there wasn't the musical snobbery of the British punk scene. I mean, basically,
Yeah.
overnight you had to sort of dish everything you've ever listened to and listen to punk, or
Yeah.
I mean, whereas in America, if you've been touring in American bands, you'll get an American punk band, and the guitarist will be quite happily playing Bon Jovi solos in the sound check. Do you know what I mean? And nobody gives a damn.
Yes, but
And
then
then
you
come
also had
back.
those kind of African rhythms or high life rhythms or jazz,
Yeah,
I mean, it was, and people that all looked quite different. They wasn't oh yes, the Sid Vicious look alike. It was like everybody had quite a vibe to it. So, and there was
yeah,
a bit of an art scene, I guess, with the Andy Warhol, Basquiat, and
yeah,
Keith
yeah,
Haring. It developed, I thought, quite interestingly in the
yeah.
70s and into the 80s. So how were you still at Shell? Were you still at Shell in the
Oh, no, that was
80s?
very short. No, it's very short lived. No, I was only at Shell for about a year, I think, something like that. And then I found out that in those days, if you worked for a year,
Hmm.
you could sign on,
Oh, happy days.
get the same amount of money as you were earning for another year. So this was my sort of what's the word?
Ted Heath year? I can't, James Callaghan. I can't remember who was in power. They changed so much. Um,
Yeah. Anyway, it's my year off, and
yes, you'd work quite
we
enough.
sort of flourished nicely into another year, and basically somehow just through the blamp, doing shit jobs and stuff like that, I became a musician, I guess, and
Right.
so I properly wanted to do it, and like I say, I'd be playing gigs with small bands and doing stuff like that in the 70s, and in the 80s, it became more likely you could put a record out. So, because there were lots of little labels, so I was in a few bands, put records out, and kind of one thing led to another, I guess.
What was the first time what band did you go in the studio with? What was the kind of first?
The first band I went to the studio with was a band called Fox in Socks, which was a band, like a sort of gothy band. They were a terrible
Fox
name.
in Socks, God.
And Mark, the bass player became the bass player in Voice of the Beehive.
Oh, the bass
Mike
player.
Jones. Yeah,
What was his name?
Mike Jones.
God, I didn't. There was another member of the Voice of the
Mark
Beehive.
Herder.
There was a guy who went in I Ludicrous, who was in the Voice of the Beehive. Fox in Socks.
If they come up. The other guy, Mark, went on to play with Jar Wobble, or produced Jar Wobble, I think. Not sure. It's a long while ago now. Yeah, so that's first.
Fox
record.
in Socks.
Yeah.
There's not a lot about that band.
There won't be anything about that, but all you'll get is Dr. Seuss, I should think.
Right, never mind. Okay.
Very
And
unlikely.
damn, there you go. So your first time. So then you Voice of the Beehive. Oh no, that was just somebody else, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was Mike. Yeah, he went into them. But I was also in this band years before that didn't get anywhere. But the bass player then later became an A&R man, and he could get me time to record bands in Air Studios in Soho. Like,
That's
Sunday,
a good contact. Who was that
Sunday
man?
at 4 o'clock in the morning. Pete. I can't remember his surname.
Yeah, he's not going to get a Christmas card, is he?
No, he's not. No. So we could go in there not knowing what we were doing and sort of learning. So I was learning on the hoof.
Yes.
And eventually so really I was doing probably more recording and production than playing at that point.
Were you meeting other producers and engineers at this stage?
No, that was the thing, because we were it was this sort of clandestine thing where you were going into this massive recording studio with like the key and everything. There'd be nobody there.
Right.
if you got out in time, you got away with it. So
Oh.
we didn't know what we were doing. We're in this sort of weird vacuum of ignorance.
Right, yeah, well, that's
But
quite
it was good.
well. A lot of people who I spoke to, a few producers and engineers. I mean, that was they just started in a very similar fashion. Making cups of tea, just being very
Yeah,
available, and then one day just being asked to do something because the person who should be doing it had
mm,
disappeared or was ill. And
yeah, that's exactly right. And I think it's probably still like that. And I feel sorry for these people who go on these courses, to learn how to be in a recording studio because things may have changed, but when I was doing stuff like that, if anybody came with lots of knowledge, their CV would be chucked in the bin because they'd be a bit threatening. they'd rather just do it their way, and you'd learn on the way up, kind of thing. The whole thing was just smoke and mirrors, really.
yes, well, this is it. Fake it till you make it.
Yeah.
So as the 80s progressed, then 83, for me, the indie pop world had really started to take off a bit with bands like the Smiths had come along, and then there's all these other little jingly jangly sounds that started to appear over the place, and that generation of 16, 18-year-olds were kind of finding their voice and their sound. What was it like for you sort of around 83, 84 time?
It's quite exciting, really, because it really felt like there was a genuine underground in music scene. There was people were starting very small venues, and they'd be packed with people, and there's a real interest for stuff, and you could kind of do what you wanted to in within parameters, or there was quite a lot of good stuff around, and it was really quite exciting to go out.
Yes. There was a lot of alternative indie nights.
Yeah,
Coupled with, labels and fanzines and bands. And also there was a huge, like you mentioned it, the unemployment benefit, which was very handy for creativity because it gave people a bit of chance. And there was the Enterprise Alliance scheme and and all those kind of things that people would just go on and you could do it for a year and you get, housing benefit, council tax paid, and £35 in your pocket a week. Wow.
I think that's quite vital. They talk about the universal wage, or is it the universal wage?
Universal credit.
No, they're trialing a wage where you actually get given money for not for being unemployed. You just get given whatever, so much a week.
Yeah,
like a pension.
yeah,
You go out and sort of discover yourself.
yeah. And I think everybody. I don't know if everybody, but yeah, there was these kind of ideas that it would be better, easier to administer, and it sort of would just, I don't know, stop people falling through the cracks. Because I think now a lot of people can just fall through the cracks, and suddenly it can end in a huge amount of homelessness and problems. Right. So having that kind of basic kind of level of income, I think it's called universal something. Anyway, I remember people have spoke about it, and I mean, obviously 50% of the population think that's horrendous, and the other 50% think, well, who cares? But
well, I guess in those days nobody knew really, did they? It wasn't involved. I mean, people probably didn't realise that that's how people got by. But that was a really, really sort of cultural time, I think, because like you say, there was the fanzines, there was poetry. People
we loved those ranty poets.
Yeah.
They were there, weren't they? And there was also, we had the gatekeepers. We had John Peel, which was very useful. Then you had the 3 weekly music papers, which had huge circulations. It was kind of quite an easy time.
Yeah, I mean, it had its bad points. I mean, there was things like the rise of the National Front, that kind of thing, especially where I was, which was awful. But then that was countered by Rock Against Racism and
yes, and then Red Wedge, which we jumped on the Socialist Workers' Party bandwagon with great enthusiasm. Anarchists.
All these things explored. Bit of existentialism, maybe existentialism.
And then a weekend at Woods at Stonehenge watching Hawkwind on acid. What more could you have? An away day.
Who needs Spotify?
No, I know. When you can watch, the mighty Dave Brock and Hawkwind trucking.
Oh yes, I was quite keen on that, I must admit.
Did you go and see it? Did you ever see Hawkwind live?
I saw him. Yeah, I saw him once doing in Reading Festival.
Fantastic, absolutely amazing.
That time of Sonic Attack, I think, whenever that was. late 70s sometime. Yeah.
Superb. Yes. Well, so then, yeah, musically then, what's your next, as the 80s progressed then? Did you
Um,
embrace the next
yeah,
indie?
I as the 80s progressed, I the first thing I did, I got a job at a florist in London.
The florist?
Florist, because you got a van. And so being a drummer, you really needed a van.
You definitely can't. You can't walk around without a van.
Not really. Which meant I could go to loads of auditions. So I just went to tons of auditions, and did that really not caring if I got in the band or not, because it was just good practice. So I did that, and I got eventually started thinking more seriously about trying to get into a band. I got in a band called The Trees, who were like a bit like very early REM, I suppose, that kind of thing.
Did they record anything?
No, not to my knowledge.
So close. Any famous people?
No.
Or not famous, but anybody who went on to
I
be...
don't know what happened, what they went on to do, to be honest.
No, okay.
Wasn't in for that long. I having said all that stuff about auditioning, I auditioned as a bass player because I was playing with this. I quite like playing the bass. I'm not very good at it, but at the time I was playing with this American woman. We had this sort of duet, a bit like the Creatures, I suppose, it's drumming and singing. But she had this Vox Teardrop bass, and I really liked it. So I thought, this is a band that needs a Vox Teardrop bass, because they're very sort of 60s kind of stuff. And I went, and I actually got in the band playing pretty awful bass, and bizarrely the drummer wanted to become a bass player, so we swapped roles. And so then I was playing this band called The Trees, and that's what led on to joining the Servants.
Oh, the Servants. Yes, this is indie.
They were friendly with them, and so that's how that came about.
So there you go. You met the famous Phil King. Yes.
Oh yes, we go back.
Who's been in a lot of indie bands, hasn't he?
He has, yeah.
He is indie royalty.
He is indie royalty, which is just what he'd like, I think.
Yes, well, the Servants, I mean, and they also appeared on the famous C86 cassette.
It did, yeah. And it's funny, because when I was researching this program, I thought I listened to David Westlake's interview.
Yes.
I had no idea that he didn't really want to be on it. I was quite surprised when he said
Well,
that.
I think the thing was, everyone thought, I don't want to be pigeonholed as an indie band. And it's like, really? I mean, there was a band called the June Brides who said, no, I definitely don't want to be in it because we're not indie. And it's like, have you listened to yourself lately?
And also, I mean, what was indie then? I mean, indie wasn't really anything. It was like...
it was pretty wide, wasn't it? I mean, you're on an independent label, you're a bit shambling, you're going to get on the John Peel show. You might get a John Peel session, and there was, and you look like you all been to a jumble cell, and at the Army and Navy stall, and there was a bit of a vibe, wasn't it?
Yeah. Well, yeah, and everybody sounded quite similar, so maybe there was something in it.
Yes.
My memory of it was everyone was thinking, this is great, because we're in obscurity, and this might change things a bit.
Well, absolutely. So you went and recorded "She's Always Hiding."
Yeah, I think it was already recorded. I can't remember, but yeah, we had recorded that. Yeah, and but at the time, this came about because Jeff Barrett had the label head.
Right.
He was previously a press officer, or the press officer at Creation, and I don't know how he got a hold of David, but that was quite a weird relationship, I think, as well. But Jeff did a hell of a lot for us, and I sort of stuck with Jeff and became a house producer for him, for his label, at the same time. And he was living in our house quite a long time because he fell on hard times. And so, yeah, we started that relationship, and that really was great for me, because it just sort of blossomed into doing both the things I loved. I was playing in a band and recording bands. And
yes. And I think there was quite a squat scene at the time in London. Did you go to things like the ambulance station? That was one of these happening places that had a band called The Hangman's Beautiful Daughter. There was a
Yeah, I
band.
played in them as well.
Did you? So did you know Sandy?
Oh yeah, Sandy Fleming. Yeah, really well. Yeah,
Yeah, I think she now lives in Las Vegas.
she lives in. Does she? Well, yeah, I kind of can imagine that. Yeah, yeah.
Yes, and yes, the Hangman's Beautiful
Phil King,
Daughters.
of course. I was
Phil
like, yes,
King, obviously,
big
well,
fan.
and Emily was married to the famous Dan Tracy from
That's
the
right. Yeah, yeah.
God. So did you meet the famous Dan Tracy?
Yeah. Well, he used to run a club in what was it called? I can't remember what it's called. He was one of the first people to have a club upstairs in a small pub in Camden.
Right. There was Alan McGee had the living room.
Yeah,
I don't know where
I
that
think it was the
was.
same pub, but they had a different name. Dan's. I can't remember what it's called now.
Dan Tracy. There was
Yeah,
and
anyway,
he
he had a club there.
Dream World Records. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good God.
Yeah, because I remember Alan used to quite because generally his club would start and he would just be able to get there after work.
Yes, I think I don't remember if it was British Rail or something.
Right, yeah, he worked at British Rail, yeah, and it was all these things is great because it was so sort of thrown together, but
yes,
just resulted in some really good stuff, Well, out of the Camden scene, I suppose. And...
Oh God, there'll be Camden the musical in a few years' time.
Oh no, yeah, I suppose
it's
by Ben Elton.
Probably poetry by Murray Lackland Young, probably the classic, the poet of our time. Oh, I know. Yeah. I mean, and it's going to be a bit cliched, all those relationship, bust up, drugs, addiction, rehab. But anyway, it's all there, great music. So then the Servants, because I know David Westlake then did a solo album, which featured members of the Go-Betweens and the Triffids.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. Well, we were quite friendly with Robert Forster.
Were you? God, he was indie gold, wasn't he? And Lindy...
He was having quite a hard. Well, he wasn't having a hard time, but he was going through changes, I suppose. At that time, where he was. I think he was worried about being pigeonholed, and I think he wanted to be a bit more avant-garde, certainly in his appearance. And generally, I think he had this sort of. So anyway, he's hanging out with us for a while, and we supported them. We supported them on one tour, and they were just really friendly people. Yeah, we did. I did a John Peel session with him and David. Not John Peel, Janice Long.
Right. Was that as the Servants?
No, I think it's David Westlake. Yeah, the Servants were split up by then.
Right. So that was with David on Janice Long.
He basically he got off of the session without having a band, and Robert.
Had you come across Luke Haynes at this point?
No, I never met him.
Right. Because he then, I think, comes along a bit.
Would have been after that, I guess.
Around there. So then how were you navigating that late 80s and early 90s? Because again, it's another decade that does feel like things start to finish and new things are beginning. I mean, the drug situation changes, doesn't it? Ecstasy, and then there's the dance scene of, bands like the Happy Mondays and Stone Roses. A guy called Gerald and, and all that kind of rave scene. And then you had the Seattle grunge scene appearing around the corner. So it was kind of interesting for a few musicians. I know quite a few people said it, like from members of the Primitives and Mighty Lemon Drops thought, I think our day has done. I don't think anyone wants our fifth album.
Yeah, well, I kind of lucked out because of Jeff again. He asked me to produce his new signing, his band called Loop. And
yes.
I produced their second single. And their drummer left, so I said I'll just play on the next tour, which was with Primal Scream. So that was quite a nice transition. So I was ideally thrown into what was up and coming to go into the 90s, I suppose. And so Loop had a fair bit of success in that period. And and that meant I could produce more bands, I suppose. I was working for a label called Ouija.
Ouija, yes, they had bands like Silverfish on it.
Yeah, so I was doing this.
And the Faith Healers. I don't know if the Faith Healers were on it, but anyway.
Yeah, they might.
So did you produce the Silverfish EP?
Only one EP I did. But I did the most scary front of house gig I did. I think I did that front of house for them at Reading Festival. which
Right.
was quite scary. But and we did. Yeah, well, I did a lot of touring with them actually all over America, and it was great because they supported this band called Pigface in America,
Oh,
which
yes.
basically like a super group of grungy people, run by Martin Atkins, who's Public Image's drummer,
That's right.
and also Bill Riefling, rest in peace, who was from Ministry, who was a lovely guy. So that was brilliant, and I played with them because they just basically every night you get a guest performer. So it'd be a Jello Biafra one night, and who you didn't know who was going to turn up. So
No,
was
that
really,
must have been very exciting.
really, yeah. So actually, that period, I really enjoyed the sort of late '80s, early '90s. It was good, and I like the fact that there were bands like Happy Mondays because they were so. I think that the thing about this whole indie thing was by then it was getting very twee, and you needed some rough edges. And they were
Yes. Well,
like,
you had a bit of shoegazing, didn't you? A few
yeah,
introspective.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know where that came from actually. Who was the main shoegazing band? But
There was a label called Sarah Records, and they
yeah,
had people like the Field Mice was on it, and
right,
then
yeah,
there was a
yeah.
whole and the Galaxy 500, I guess, would have been in that scene. I mean, it was, I suppose it was nice to know there was such variety. You didn't have to stick with one tribe. I mean, obviously we probably did, but looking back, you think, oh, I wish I'd been less uptight and just not worried so much about what I liked and didn't
Well,
like.
yes, yeah, that
But
exactly. That's so important. Yeah,
yeah, because there was a huge
I
amount.
really
Because
don't
you
think.
had at that stage you had the Buttholes and Sonic Youth, and
Yeah,
Husker Du had broke up, but then Bob Mould was doing various bits.
yeah, that's right. He's doing his own thing.
So
Yeah,
it's interesting.
I really like all those bands. Yeah, it was
Yeah,
just.
there was
I think what it
Blast
was.
First Records were good actually, and there was bands like in Britain there was it Godflesh was
Godflesh,
appearing.
yeah, Justin Broderick, yeah, yeah.
Yes.
We did quite a lot of stuff with him as well because, well, with them, Benny was the bass player was deaf in that band, which was quite amazing. So he just used to turn up really loud and vibrate the stage and hear himself that way. Yeah, we did quite a lot with Godflesh. Loop did. We toured with them and they did a split single and that kind of thing.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
remember. So did Loop then call it a day in about 91?
yeah. We did 3 albums, proper albums.
And did you go on tour with them as well?
Oh yeah, we toured all over the place. Yeah,
What was
yeah.
touring like at that time?
It was a bit like being in the army, I suppose. It was, it was. No, I say that was great. The first big tour I did was in Europe, which I really, really enjoyed. It was just in the back of a van, just driving
Yeah.
around, but you were playing gigs and it was full of people, and that was the main thing, which is kind of what you want, really.
It was just the food isn't great, is it? The sandwiches.
It's all right in Europe.
Was it?
In Britain, America's even worse. Actually, it's terrible. But yeah, I love touring. I really, really do.
So when Loop came to an end in 91, what's your next kind of period then?
Then myself and Neil, the bass player, formed a band called the Hair and Skin Trading Company.
Oh yes, so this appears
for a while. So yeah, we put out 2 or 3 albums.
And was this on Beggar's Banquet or Situation 2?
Situation. I don't actually what it was then. It started out Situation 2. Probably was still Situation 2. Yeah. So basically, we just carried on from Loop, and Robert did a thing called Main.
Oh yes.
So yeah, just carried on touring really.
Did you do any John Peel sessions?
Hair and Skin?
Yeah.
No, we did 3 with Loop.
Right.
1 with the Servants. That was my John
That was your Peel moment, actually. What was your audience like for the Hair and Skin Trading Company?
What kind of people?
Yes, who was your typical audience?
There were lots of Loop refugees, I suppose, and there was quite a few. I mean, it wasn't what we were doing was quite sort of improvised, I suppose, and kind of a bit avant-garde. But then there was bands like Tortoise, and there was lots that at that time things were kind of audiences were quite open to that kind of thing, you know, so improvisation and stuff which wasn't ever going to be in the charts. So it was great. I really liked it a lot. There's a club we used to play, tiny little club in called the Sausage Machine in Camden, and they just put great stuff on like that.
Yes. Well, and did you play Reading Festival as well?
Yeah.
What was that like?
Well, it's good. Well, for me, I've done it. I think I've done it 3 times. The first time I did it, it was really weird because there's a band called Living Colour.
Oh yes.
I think Mick Jagger produced. Anyway, it's something to do with them. So the way it works when you play a festival is you set up all your stuff on wheels, and so you got a band behind you all set up. And so as soon as you're finished, they wheel you off and wheel the next one on. So all the way through our first gig at Reading, the drummer in Living Colour was playing his set, listening to headphones behind me, and Mick Jagger was also there looking at him. So for me, it was kind of a disaster. It was really, really difficult. Slightly enjoyable, but at the same time, it was good. Yeah, I mean, it's my favourite thing that Hair and Skin did was a festival called Roskilde Festival in Sweden.
Right.
Amazing. That was just such a great atmosphere. I always like playing in Europe more because, I mean, it's a huge generalisation, but it just seems to be more cultural generally and more open-minded. And yeah.
It's interesting that with a lot of artists, they often are very popular, big in one particular country. I was talking to someone yesterday and they went, Italy, massive. You know, Germany, not too bad.
Yeah.
Rest not that great. And other people, it's Spain or it could be, you know, Holland. But what particular country took you to heart?
Italy, definitely. I mean, we always did quite well with Loop and Hair and Skin in Italy, and then after Hair and Skin, I was asked to produce a singer for Beggar's Banquet called Pinkie Maclure. So I did that, and then we sort of hit it off, and we formed a band called Pumajaw, and we've done that. Well, we've done that for years. So we've got about 8 with them, with us, and all our success was in Italy. Basically, they really took us to our heart, and we've just been touring Italy and Russia.
Well, it was the woman called Sarah Jane Morris who I interviewed, who had been, you know, amazing amount of work and bits and pieces. Kind of her most famous is the Communards Don't Leave Me This Way in that first album, but has just been working hard and slogging and hustling and putting out albums, you know, having to get the money together to do it. Most of it's self-financed, but, you know, the Italian is market, all that, you know, playing live shows there. It's, you know, it's forget everything else, just go to Italy, do your gigs and come back again. They just love her. So,
they really, really are. It's just, I don't know, it's just a great country to play in. And yeah, well, actually, it's not only Italy. Greece was similar as well. I think it's places that don't really have. I mean, Italy have a huge amount of bands that don't really get on in other countries for some reason.
Yes. And what was it, you know, so with the band in the 90s, was it 3 albums that you brought out at this stage?
Well, with Loop or Hair and Skin?
Hair and Skin.
Hair and Skin, yeah, we did 3 albums, yeah.
What was the first album, Joe in 9? Yes.
That was our first one, which we did with a producer called Rolly Mosselman, who worked with a band called the Young Gods.
Oh, God. I just got an email about their new album that's come out.
Really?
Or coming out, The Young Gods, and a tour that they've got lined up. And I thought,
it'll be interesting, that.
Yes, I went to see them when they were, and Silverfish was supporting them in the late 80s.
That's right, yeah. Yeah.
It was a little bit, the crowd, I felt a little bit uncomfortable, a bit scared.
I think you should. I think you should, right?
No, there was a few people who looked a little bit, interesting. But anyway, there you go. So was it how did you bring records together or tracks together? Was there one person? Did you used to jam together? Did you bring...
No, it was all come out. It was all from improvising stuff, really, and then we chop it up. We kind of worked in the way, I suppose we worked the same way as Can did. We just record tons of stuff and then edit it, and then sort of learn what you'd edited and turn that into something. But again, we were at that point we were getting free studio time in place in Islington through the night, so we do lots of night sessions and just record tons of stuff and then turn that into something, and then maybe just improvise live and just ignore what we put out, kind of thing. It's quite anarchic, really, but yeah, like I say, you were given the chance to do that then. You probably still are now, I don't know.
Yes, it's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Did you play America at all at this stage?
Yeah, loads of times. Yeah.
Did you play at CBGB's or Max's?
Yeah, CBGB's and the Knitting Factory in New York. Yeah, CBGB's was. I suppose it was a bit weird. I mean, it was great being there, but it's like, I suppose it's a bit like, by that time it was a bit like the Marquee. It was a bit like playing Hard Rock Cafe or something. Do you know what I mean? It was so famous.
Right.
But I actually preferred the Knitting Factory. That was a fantastic place. But it's nice to say, you played at CBGB's, obviously.
Well, yes, it's all good. Who were you? Were you signed to another label in America at this stage, or was it still?
Yeah, I think it was a label called. Well, it was a beggars offshoot called Thirsty Ear. But it was a beggars banquet label that was doing their own thing.
Yes.
Essentially, it was beggars banquet. Yeah, and they on our last tour of America, that's where we got dropped. Actually, it was in America. We got told in America halfway through our tour, and had to drive the van back to Los Angeles without doing any gigs. So it's really that's rock and roll.
God, that's God. Yeah, I heard that story like that yesterday. I think it was. So a band called Sad Cafe that had everything lined up, and just the day before flying, it was like, no, it's all off. Forget it.
God.
The record. We haven't sold enough. It's over. Yeah. And it was a bit like, and I just think, you think, God, that must be devastating. Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, the most annoying thing was they could have told us, because we'd hired the van in Los Angeles to then sort of do the whole of America. And they told us in New York, which was like 5,000 miles away, basically, from where we had to take the van back. So, yeah, it was a bit of shit, really.
Crikey, that is really tacky, isn't it? Was it because of record sales or ticket sales?
Probably both, I imagine. Yeah, I think, and at that time, actually, things were really changing. This is accountants becoming more involved in the A&R side of things. For lots of labels have been sold off at that time, or being swallowed up by bigger labels.
Yes,
accountants became more powerful.
It's interesting though, because there was a lot of kind of money flying around during that 90s period as well.
Yeah, certainly was. Yeah, I mean, and into the mid-90s as well with the internet. When the internet started to take hold, the money was just ridiculous. How many?
Because everyone was replacing their vinyl with CDs, and CDs were quite expensive, and
Yeah, there just seemed to be, and like hedge funds were invented, and there just seemed to be lots of people with lots of money sort of interfering with music because they probably thought there's good return on it. And
yes,
it's weird because I mean A&M Records.
Yeah, A&M.
They basically got shut down at that time, and there's all sorts of things going on. It's quite sinister, really. The whole money became very important.
I think there was a guy called, was it Guy Hands or somebody who was one of those hedge fund people who seemed to, that was EMI. There was lots of murkiness going on in EMI, wasn't there?
Yeah. So yeah, it's all a bit.
And there was a lot of artists being dropped, after being given the yes, it's all good. Oh no, sorry, we've made a different decision. You're gone, and it was
Yeah.
all and devastated. People were quite emotionally devastated. I think that was they don't really take that into consideration in that
No, not at all. No, not
heady
at all.
world. So when you
Yeah.
came to do the second album for Hair and Skin, what was that like? Were the band still had good momentum at this stage?
Yeah, that was when we did have momentum. Actually, the second album we were doing all right. We were actually writing much better stuff, and we had we were quite sort of in with Mute at that time because with Luke we used an engineer called Paul Kendall, who was basically Daniel Miller's assistant when he was young, and then became their house engineer kind of thing.
Yes.
So we were working with him, and yeah, it's great. The second album was particularly. I really liked doing that, and that's when we were doing better shows and bigger venues, and then we got dropped. So it's quite strange. So they sort of ramp up, and then that's that.
It's weird, isn't it? Because Britpop was doing its thing, and there was, it was strange. So when you did the third album, did you do on?
That was a different label.
Right.
Yeah.
My God.
Yeah. That was a really that we just went crazy on that album, and that's the only album that John Peel likes, actually, the third album. Apparently.
Yes. Well, that's good to get John.
It's quite good, really.
So where did you record it?
We recorded it in this some of it in my house and some of it in the studio in Islington called Vaughan's Studio, because the engineer there could get us free time, basically. So we did in a few places, but it was mostly there, and yeah, we didn't have any budget, but it's probably my favourite album, actually.
Well, God, I'll have to go and give it more attention.
Yeah,
won't I?
Psychedelic Music, it's called.
Well, nice. I know that's all good.
It's on the Freak label.
On the Freak label, which I've never come across either.
I think it might be the only release.
Yes. Yeah. So this was all through the great John Major years. So then, yes. Is it 95 the band, 96 the band decide to call it quits?
Yeah. Basically, we did. And then after that, because we were all three of us were producing other bands anyway, so we were all kind of busy. So we just had enough, and went more into production. I moved to Brighton, and that was probably the worst thing I could possibly have done, because it's like I died.
Right.
Actually, really, if you weren't in the scene, that was it.
That was the Levellers' time, wasn't it, during the 90s as well? And they were big in Brighton.
They were, yeah. Oh, yeah, it's quite a lot going on. And there's still a lot of dance stuff going on, obviously, there as well.
Oh, yes, of course.
It's okay.
Yes. So then after Brighton, what happens then?
I moved back to London out of necessity. And Pinkie and I started doing recording then. We got a deal with a label in Sheffield and put the first album out, and then sort of carried on from there. And very quickly we got a guy from Italy who wanted us to go and play in Italy, and we just did that. We didn't bother trying in Britain because it was kind of a hostile environment at that point for for anyone, actually. And you could just go to Italy and have a great time, and it was really just a really nice experience. So that's what. So we
was did. That there was a mini album, a small piece of Afterwards, and then
yeah, that was through a label called Fence.
Right.
Their claim to fame is the Beta Band and a guy called King Creosote was there. Yeah, because it's quite strange. When we first moved to Scotland from Tottenham, we moved to Scotland and to a very tiny fishing village called Cellardyke. And as a joke, I put in Cellardyke record companies, and one came up. this kind of label called Fence, and that was them. It was Kenny and his brother Gordon, who was in the Beta band, who had this tiny little label.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah, so we sort of joined in with them.
Well, absolutely. And then when did you decide to become Pumajaw?
Well, that's at that time, actually. Yeah, that's when we started doing more stuff, and there was this sort of movement called, it's like a weird folk movement sort of thing, in which was basically just kind of gothy folk, I suppose. And
Yes.
we kind of fitted into that, and we were doing all right. We were able to sell records and tour, and it was quite nice. I mean, it was a nice little cottage industry, and then we got kind of the internet kind of stopped that because you couldn't sell CDs anymore.
No, it's quite an interesting scene, isn't it? That sort of folk world. It can bring out again some sort of quite dodgy characters.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Yeah.
who hark back to a rather interesting period of German history.
Yeah, well, there was some good stuff too. I mean, there was some good stuff from America, probably more than here. But there was, even here, there was some okay stuff. Yeah, there was lots of stuff which wasn't that great, but it was a scene, I suppose. And
was that so? Did that touch on Americana at all, or was it just mostly
a bit? Yeah, I mean, there was bands like the Hanson Family who were who were great, kind of country-esque sort of.
Yes, and Willard Grant Conspiracy.
Yeah, sort of noir, sort of Coen Brothers sort of style stuff.
Yes.
Yeah, so that was good. I like that that side of things. But by then, I was kind of I don't know really. I think I was just starting to lose interest with everything. In a way, I didn't find anything that inspiring.
Right. To
be honest.
So the O years were they?
There were O. There was zero for a while. Yeah, I can't even think what I was. I think I just went into sort of vacuum in those years and did other things. Did something else. We were still doing music as well, but it didn't have. It was difficult because we couldn't. I mean, the idea was we have a band, make enough money to do the band most of the time, and if we couldn't, we'd have a small business or something like that. So or whatever, so we could kind of have a nice lifestyle and do music and go to Italy. But it relied on us selling records, and when we couldn't sell records anymore, then that kind of stopped. And I think I just got a bit sort of deflated by the whole thing and stopped doing anything. So yeah. I mean, now what I'm doing now isn't really related to music at all. I'm now I carried on doing lots of production, and I went on a course with Chris Watson, who was he used to be in the Cabs, and he's now the main sort of sound recorders for the BBC. So he does all Blue Planet, and that kind of thing.
Right.
And he introduced me to this this 3D recording method, which I really got into, and now I've got a 3D recording studio in my back garden, and people come here and do that, and I just really like it. It's not particularly. It can be musical. It doesn't have to be. It could be anything. Really, sort of. We live in a sort of beautiful place here, and kind of just that's what I'm into.
Yes, but you still release a lot of stuff as Pumajaw.
Yeah, well, we haven't. I mean, the last one was a year or two ago now, and we might still do stuff. The other stuff we're doing is Pinkie is now quite a well-known artist, and the last thing we did together was at the CCA in Glasgow. We did she had a massive exhibition there. And one of the rooms was huge, and we did a 3D concert there. So I was, she was singing, I was sampling her and doing stuff in 3 dimensions, which went out, which was great. We did that 4 times, and we're doing it again in Somerset next year. So I think that's more what I'm into now, is more, that kind of thing.
But earlier I was listening to some of your Bandcamp stuff, sort of albums like this, Song Noir.
Yeah. Oh, that was the thing we did for Edinburgh Festival. That was like because we thought we could get a grant to do that, and it was a way of. We kind of got fed up playing small clubs in Scotland because it's mostly just people just talking all the way through it.
Right.
If we did the Edinburgh Festival, that'd be somewhere people would sit down and listen to it if anybody came at all, and it was great. We did it 2 years running, that Song Noir thing.
Right.
Yeah, it was a really nice experience.
Amazing. Yeah, no, I thought it sounded great. And then was your next kind of album release, was this other one, is it Scapa
Flow.
Yeah.
Full Scap.
Yes.
Yeah, that was the last album we put out.
Right. There you go. So you are still sort of producing and making and
yes, I'm still doing some film music at the moment, and people here since I moved here, I've done 3 films, 3 little films, and I'm doing one for another guy in Glasgow next week. So yeah, it's things like that. Yeah, small things. I'm not really. I'm quite happy just to be recording, to be honest. Now I really enjoy recording.
Well, absolutely, it's quite a nice little number to do, actually.
Yeah.
And did you were on Fire Records with?
Yeah, we did one album on Fire, Curiosity Box. We did, and out of that that's how we got to go to Moscow. Actually, was on that, that was quite a strange experience because we hadn't brought that album out. Yet, but we went to play this festival, and 2 things are quite weird about it. Everybody knew us, and we didn't realise anybody knew anything about us. They all knew our songs, we were singing along.
Right.
It's quite a sort of large venue, and at the end, there's a big queue of people with the record that we hadn't released, which they downloaded from the internet and printed the covers out and asking us to sign it, and they thought we'd be really pleased.
Yes, and you went.
That's quite strange.
Yes. And I know a few artists who we are massive in the Philippines, absolutely, but they bootleg everything, and so
that's right. Yes,
we're bigger than any band, but they haven't. Apart from the live show, they won't make a penny because yes, right. God, it is tricky, isn't it? But anyway, well, it does sound like you've got quite a beautiful life in Scotland.
Yeah, I'm really, really enjoying it. I mean, it's just this new venture has just started, really. So, yeah, I'm really, really enjoying it. I've had 3. All I've had so far, we've just done 3 sort of guinea pig runs to make sure everything's working properly, and they've just gone really well. So, yeah, start next week, really doing it.
And Pinkie is concentrating on her artwork and.
Yeah, she's got a piece a couple of pieces in a show in London at the moment in Islington. She's got there's this big thing we're doing in Somerset next January, and she's doing some other things. I can't remember what else. There's something else in Somerset for some reason. It's great, really. I feel quite smug now.
I don't blame you. Well, when you get to that point in life where Phil, yes, you're not having to prove yourself. But she did various records going back to the...
Oh, yeah, she did her own stuff, yeah.
All the way back to the mid-'80s.
Yeah, well, on One Little Indian, she was doing records for them, yeah.
So her career has been a musical journey as well, hasn't it?
Absolutely, yeah.
Oh, how fascinating. Yeah. So I'm going to have to discover the work of Unman.
Yeah. And they're all good.
Well, I'll be curious. I'll be very excited by this, actually.
Yeah, you should check her out. Yeah,
I am going to check this out. Actually, you've sparked my excitement. Actually, good. So going forward, you've got just more sort of soundscapes, soundtracks. And working in Sound 3D.
Yeah, and I've just really like. I just like teaching it, and when I worked in the studio, I was always had an apprentice. Always like doing that. I always like bringing sort of people on into doing recording. So yeah, this is sort of half residency, half sort of course, I suppose.
Well, that's nice.
Doing it. Yeah. So
That's a nice way. Yeah. Well, look, John, thank you ever so much. I can see it's still light with you, actually, isn't it?
yeah, it is. Yeah.
We are slightly. Oh, no.
darker.
So I think it's a full moon tonight, isn't it? So
Well, it could be. Could well be. Yeah. Well, you was quite close yesterday. Yeah.
Or it could have been last night. But you must have those. Do you get to see the Milky Way in all its glory?
We do.
God, it must be. I can see why you are feeling smug. It's really nice, isn't it?
Yeah. I'm feeling smug.
You go, oh, look, there's Northern Lights. Oh, how bad. Just like blasé about it. God, that's good. Well, thank you again for your time. And if you want, I can always, I'll send you the link if you want, and you can always use it on any. Do you have a website or a?
Well, I've got a website for what I'm doing now, but not for. We just use Bandcamp for all the musical stuff. But,
yes. Well, I'll definitely send it. But thank you again for your time. This has been amazing. And it's lovely to speak to you, and have a nice one. And I might drop Pinkie a line, actually.
Well,
anyway,
sure she's just next door. So
she's just there, isn't she? Anyway, have a lovely evening and enjoy the moon.
You, David. Okay.
Take care. See you later. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.
I know, that is a beautiful ending to a beautiful interview. That was John Wills talking about his life in music. And if you want to know any more information, you can go to various social media platform sites and you might be able to find out some more about him. I will put a link in in the notes below of, I think, his Bandcamp page. But anyway, this has been the C86 Show, David Eastaugh. If you want to contact me, you can on those social media platform sites. Just do that. Search engine business, C86 Show. All these interviews have been archived on Spotify, iTunes, Podbean. Do check them out if you want to. Anyway, have a great week. Stay safe.